I'm Amy, and I'm 28 years old. 3 months after my father's funeral, my mother showed up at my apartment door with my 17-year-old brother, Danny, 2 garbage bags of his clothes, and said the words that would change everything. "He's your burden now." She was talking about $800 a month in disability benefits that I had no idea she'd been collecting for him. I didn't scream. I didn't break down. I took a deep breath and watched her walk back to her car like she was dropping off dry cleaning. What I didn't know was that she'd already planned to keep collecting those benefits while I struggled to figure out how to care for Danny alone. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely blindsided by family betrayal. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Danny stood in my doorway, rocking slightly back and forth, his eyes fixed on the ground. He hadn't spoken since Dad died. Danny was autistic and mostly nonverbal, though he used to hum jingles from TV commercials under his breath. Even that had stopped after the funeral. "Come on in, Danny," I said softly, stepping aside. He shuffled past me, still clutching his favorite stuffed elephant that Dad had bought him years ago. The elephant was threadbare now, missing one button eye, but Danny never went anywhere without it. My apartment wasn't big. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen that barely fit 2 people. I'd bought it with my inheritance after Dad died, the small portion that came to me while Mom got the house and everything else, including Danny's share since she was his legal guardian. I guided him to the couch, where he immediately sat in the corner and began his routine of arranging and rearranging the throw pillows. Always in the same order. Always precise. It was one of his comfort behaviors, something that helped him feel safe in new environments. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "His medication schedule is in the bag. His school pickup is at 3 p.m. daily. Good luck." That was it. No explanation about how I was supposed to manage a full-time job while driving Danny to and from his special needs school every day. No discussion about what came next. No consideration for the fact that I'd never taken care of someone with Danny's needs for more than a weekend. I sat down across from him and really looked at my brother for the first time in months. He was thinner than I remembered. There was a faded yellow bruise on his forearm that I hadn't noticed before. When I asked him about it, he just stared at his hands and started humming very quietly the first sound I'd heard him make all day. The reality hit me like a freight train. I had no idea how to do this. Danny needed structure, routine, specialized care that I couldn't provide while working 40 hours a week. I started making mental calculations of everything that would need to change. His school transportation alone would require me to rearrange my entire work schedule. His medications cost $300 monthly. Then there was food, clothing, and constant supervision. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. Support groups, government assistance programs, anything that might help me understand what I'd just inherited. That's when I found the first piece of information that made my stomach drop. Danny was still listed as living with Mom at her address. All his benefits, all his support services, everything was still going to her house, the house where he no longer lived. I called the Disability Services office thinking it was just a paperwork error. "Ma'am, we can't change his address without written consent from his legal guardian," the woman on the phone explained. "I'm his sister. He's living with me now. According to our records, his mother is still his guardian and primary caregiver. If there's been a change, she'll need to file the proper forms." I hung up and stared at my phone. Mom hadn't just abandoned Danny. She'd made sure to keep control of his benefits while dumping the actual responsibility on me. Danny looked up from his pillow arrangement and caught my eye for just a second before looking away again. In that brief moment, I saw something that made my chest tighten. He looked scared. Not just confused or overwhelmed, but genuinely frightened. I moved to sit beside him on the couch, careful not to disturb his careful pillow configuration. "Hey, buddy," I said quietly. "You're safe here. I'm going to figure this out." He reached for my hand, something he rarely did with anyone except Dad. His fingers were cold and trembling slightly. That night, after I'd helped Danny through his bedtime routine and settled him in my bedroom while I took the couch, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. 3 months. Mom had waited 3 months after Dad's death to dump this on me. I thought about Dad's funeral, how Mom had seemed so composed, so in control. She'd handled all the arrangements, accepted condolences gracefully, played the grieving widow perfectly. Now I realized it had all been performance. She'd been planning her escape from responsibility the entire time. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mom. "Don't call me unless it's an emergency." I set the phone aside and listened to Danny's soft breathing from the bedroom. Tomorrow I'd have to figure out how to get him to school, pick him up, manage his afternoon routine, and somehow maintain my job. But tonight I made a decision that would change both our lives. Whatever it took, however long it took, I was going to make sure Danny felt safe and loved. And if Mom thought she could just walk away while keeping his benefits, she had seriously underestimated me. I didn't know it yet, But Mom's abandonment of Danny wasn't just cruelty. It was calculated fraud that would eventually catch up with her in ways she never imagined. The first week was a disaster. I burned through 3 sick days trying to establish a routine with Danny while frantically calling every disability service in the county. Each conversation ended the same way. Without Mom's signature, I couldn't access anything. My work supervisor, Janet, called me into her office Thursday morning. "Amy, I understand you're dealing with a family situation, but we need to discuss your schedule changes." I explained about Danny's school pickup requirements and his need for supervision. The special needs school required family pickup, no bus service. "Look, I sympathize, but you can't leave at 2:30 every day indefinitely. We need to find a solution." The solution, apparently, was burning through my vacation days to cover early departures. I'd also need to figure out what would happen when Danny aged out of the school system in a few months when he turned 18. Danny had a meltdown on Tuesday when I tried to take him grocery shopping after school. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the sounds too overwhelming. He dropped to the floor in the cereal aisle and started hitting his head with his fists. Other shoppers stared like we were some kind of spectacle. I knelt beside him, speaking in the calm voice Dad had taught me to use during episodes like this. "It's okay, Danny. Let's count together. 1, 2, 3. By the time we got home, I was exhausted and Danny was completely shut down for the rest of the day. Thursday brought another crisis. Danny's medication was running low and the pharmacy wouldn't release a refill without updated insurance information that was still tied to Mom's account. I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. I tried texting. No response. I drove to her house that evening after settling Danny with his homework. The lights were on, her car was in the driveway, but she wouldn't answer the door. I could see her moving around inside through the front window. Standing on her porch, knocking on a door that would never open, I felt something shift inside me. The desperation was starting to turn into something else, something harder. By Friday, I'd figured out a temporary solution. My insurance could cover Danny's medications as a dependent, but it would take weeks to process. I paid out of pocket at the pharmacy, $237 that I couldn't really afford. The pharmacist, an older woman with kind eyes, noticed my hand shaking as I signed the receipt. "Tough week?" she asked. "You could say that." I managed a weak smile. "My brother's been staying with me, and getting his care transferred has been complicated." She leaned across the counter slightly. "If you don't mind me asking, is someone making this more difficult than it needs to be?" I looked at her, surprised by the directness of the question. "Because I see this sometimes," she continued. "Family members who create obstacles when they shouldn't. If someone's preventing you from accessing care for a dependent, there are people who can help." She handed me a business card along with Danny's medication. Jennifer Martinez, Family Advocacy Services. She's helped other families navigate these situations. That weekend, I called Jennifer Martinez. I called Jennifer. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes as I explained the situation. When I finished, there was a long pause. "Amy," she said finally, "what your mother is doing has a name. It's called caregiver fraud, and it's more common than you might think." "Fraud?" "She's accepting government benefits intended for Danny's care while not actually providing that care. That's illegal. And if she's preventing you from accessing services he needs, that could constitute neglect by proxy." I felt my hands start to shake again, but this time it wasn't from stress. It was from anger. "What can I do?" "Document everything. Every text, every phone call, every expense you're covering that should be coming from his benefits. We're going to need to build a case to transfer guardianship and benefits to you." "How long will that take?" "It's a process, but Amy, there's something else you should know. If your mother is receiving benefits for Danny while he's not in her care, she's likely getting more money than just disability payments. There could be food assistance, medical coverage, housing supplements. We're probably talking about $1,500 a month." I hung up feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. $1,500. While I was draining my savings to buy Danny's medications and rearranging my entire life to provide basic care. That night, I sat with Danny as he arranged his art supplies for the 100th time. It was a new routine he'd developed, and I noticed he was starting to hum again, just barely audible. But it was progress. "Danny," I said quietly, "did Mom ever hurt you?" He stopped moving, his hands frozen on a blue crayon. "You can tell me. You're safe now." He looked at me for a long moment, then slowly rolled up his sleeve. There were 3 small bruises on his forearm, finger-shaped marks that made my stomach turn. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, he hummed the jingle from a car commercial. It was the first real sound he'd made since arriving. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "And thank you for making sounds again. That won't happen here." He nodded and went back to his crayons. But something had changed. He was starting to trust me. Later that night, I started a notebook. Every detail I could remember about Danny's condition when Mom dropped him off, the bruises, his weight loss, his complete silence that was slowly breaking. Jennifer Martinez had told me to document everything. I was just getting started. The next morning brought an unexpected gift. Danny hummed the McDonald's jingle while eating breakfast. It wasn't speech, but it was communication. It was hope. It also strengthened my resolve. Mom had hurt him, neglected him, and was profiting from his disability while I struggled to provide basic care. She'd made a mistake when she chose me as Danny's dumping ground. I wasn't going to just accept this situation. I was going to fight back. 2 weeks into our new arrangement, I made a discovery that changed everything. I was helping Danny organize his clothes when I found an envelope tucked into one of his jacket pockets. Inside were medical appointment cards and benefit statements that Mom had apparently forgotten to remove. The numbers made my blood run cold. Danny's monthly disability payment, $812. Food assistance, $416. Medical benefits that covered all his therapy and medications. Housing assistance because she claimed him as a dependent, $300 monthly reduction in her rent. She was collecting over $1,500 a month for a child who wasn't even living with her. But that wasn't the worst part. The appointment cards showed regular visits to a behavioral specialist, someone named Dr. Chen, who I'd never heard of. The last appointment was scheduled for 2 days ago. Danny had missed it because he was with me, and I had no idea it existed. I called Dr. Chen's office immediately. "I'm calling about Danny Morrison's missed appointment," I told the receptionist. "Oh yes, his mother called to reschedule. She said he was going through a difficult transition and needed to skip a few sessions." My hands gripped the phone tighter. "When did she call?" "Let me check." "It was the day before his appointment." She seemed very concerned about his adjustment to a new living situation. Mom had known Danny would miss his appointment because she'd dumped him with me, but instead of transferring his care, she'd made excuses to keep his services active under her name. "I need to speak with Dr. Chen," I said. "I'm Danny's sister, and there's been a change in his living situation. I'm sorry, but we can only discuss patient information with the guardian on file. That would be his mother." After I hung up, I sat staring at the appointment cards spread across my kitchen table. Speech therapy, occupational therapy, behavioral counseling. Danny had been receiving comprehensive care that I knew nothing about. Care that he was no longer getting because Mom wanted to maintain control of his benefits. I called Jennifer Martinez again. "This is huge," she said when I explained what I'd found. "Document everything. Take photos of the statements, the appointment cards, everything. This proves intent to defraud." "What does that mean?" "It means your mother isn't just making a mistake or being difficult. She's actively concealing information to continue collecting benefits fraudulently. This changes our approach completely." That afternoon, I took Danny to a walk-in clinic. I told the doctor I was concerned about some bruising I'd noticed and wanted to make sure he was healthy. Dr. Williams was thorough and patient with Danny, explaining each step of the examination in simple terms. When he was finished, he asked to speak with me privately. "Your brother is underweight for his age and height," he said. "Not dangerously so, but enough to be concerning. And those bruises on his arms appear to be from grip marks. How long has he been in your care?" 2 weeks. "Has he been eating better since the transition?" I thought about it. Danny had been hesitant about food at first, but his appetite was definitely improving. And he'd started humming commercial jingles during meals, a sign that he was feeling more comfortable. "Yes, actually, much better." Dr. Williams made notes in Danny's file. "I'd like to see him again in a month to track his weight gain. And Amy, I have to ask, was he being adequately cared for in his previous living situation?" The question hung in the air between us. I knew what he was really asking. "I don't think so," I said quietly. He nodded grimly. "If you need documentation of his current condition for any legal proceedings, this examination will be on file." That evening, I sat down with my laptop and started researching benefit fraud. What I learned made me sick. Caregiver fraud costs the government millions of dollars every year. But more importantly, it often leaves vulnerable individuals without the care they need while someone else profits from their disability. Danny was a victim of financial abuse, and I'd been so focused on figuring out how to care for him that I'd almost missed the bigger picture. I started a new document on my computer, a timeline of everything that had happened since Dad's death. Every conversation with Mom, every missed appointment, every dollar I'd spent that should have been covered by Danny's benefits. Jennifer Martinez had told me to build a case. I was going to build an airtight one. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was betraying you in the worst possible way? Because what I found next made me realize that Mom's abandonment of Danny was just the beginning of her deception. Around 10 that night, I decided to do something I probably should have done weeks ago. I drove to Mom's house. Her lights were on, and through the window I could see her watching television in the living room that used to be Danny's safe space. She looked relaxed, comfortable. like she didn't have a care in the world. I sat in my car across the street and watched her for 20 minutes. At one point, she got up and moved to the kitchen, where I could see her talking on the phone and laughing. She was living her normal life while Danny struggled with the trauma of losing his father and being abandoned by his mother, while I drained my savings to provide basic care that his benefits should have covered, while he missed therapy appointments that could help him process his grief and adjust to his new living situation. But as I watched her carefree evening, I realized something important. Mom hadn't just made a desperate mistake in her grief. She'd calculated this. She'd planned to keep the money while dumping the responsibility. She'd chosen freedom over her son's well-being. I drove home that night with a new understanding of exactly who my mother really was, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I had a plan. Danny was humming the Kit Kat jingle when I walked in the door, and that small sound of contentment made my decision crystal clear. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. I was at Danny's new pediatrician appointment, his first real checkup since moving in with me, when Dr. Peterson asked a question that opened a door I didn't know existed. "Amy, have you considered applying for emergency guardianship?" I looked up from the forms I was filling out. "What's that?" "In cases where a dependent's welfare is at risk due to neglect or abandonment, the courts can expedite guardianship transfers. It's designed for situations exactly like yours." She explained that if I could demonstrate that Danny's current guardian was failing to provide adequate care, I could petition for temporary emergency guardianship while pursuing permanent custody. "The process moves much faster than standard guardianship cases," she said. "And once you have emergency guardianship, you can immediately access all his benefits and services." I felt something shift in my chest. Hope, maybe. Or just relief that there was actually a path forward. What kind of evidence would I need? Dr. Peterson was quiet for a moment, then pulled out Danny's file. His medical records show missed appointments, delayed medication refills, and concerning weight loss over the past few months. Combined with the physical evidence of grip marks and his documented regression in communication, you'd have a strong case. That afternoon, I called the family court clerk's office. The woman who answered, Mrs. Garcia, walked me through the emergency guardianship process. "You'll need to file a petition with supporting documentation," she explained. "Medical records, evidence of abandonment, proof that you're providing care. There's a filing fee of $250, and you'll need to serve notice to the current guardian." "Serve notice?" "Legal papers have to be delivered to your mother informing her of the petition. She'll have the right to contest it." My stomach dropped. What if she contests it? Then it goes to a hearing where both sides present their evidence. But honey, if what you're describing is accurate, emergency guardianship cases like this usually go in favor of the person actually providing care. I hung up, feeling simultaneously energized and terrified. This was real. I was about to take legal action against my own mother. That evening, I called my best friend from college, Lisa. She'd become a family law attorney and had always been someone I could count on for honest advice. "Amy, what you're describing sounds like a clear case for emergency guardianship," she said after I explained the situation. "And the benefit fraud aspect makes it even stronger. Lisa, I can't afford a lawyer for this." There was a pause. "Amy, what if I told you that you don't need to worry about that?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm going to represent you, pro bono. This case, it's exactly why I became a family attorney." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Lisa, I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering. Danny deserves better than what he's gotten, and you deserve support for doing the right thing." That night, I sat Danny down for a conversation I'd been dreading. "Danny, you know how you've been living with me instead of Mom?" He nodded, not looking up from his puzzle. But I noticed he was humming the jingle from a cereal commercial under his breath, a new development that meant he was feeling more secure. "I want to make that official, so you can see your doctors again and get all the help you need. But it means there might be some difficult conversations with Mom." Danny stopped working on his puzzle and looked at me directly. "She won't like that." "No, she probably won't. Are you okay with that?" He was quiet for a long time, then said something that broke my heart. "She was angry all the time after Daddy died." "You're not angry." I had to turn away so he wouldn't see my face. How had I missed how bad things had gotten for him? "I promise you, Danny, I will never be angry at you for being yourself." That night, I started filling out the emergency guardianship petition with Lisa's guidance over the phone. Each section forced me to confront the reality of what Mom had done: abandonment, neglect, fraud. By morning, I had a 20-page document detailing Danny's situation, complete with medical records, photographs of his bruises, bank statements showing my out-of-pocket expenses, and a timeline of Mom's refusal to cooperate with his care. Lisa reviewed it before I submitted it. "This is thorough," she said. "Really thorough. You've documented everything perfectly. What happens next? You file it with the court, Pay the fee and request expedited review due to ongoing neglect. Then a process server delivers copies to your mother and she has 5 days to respond. 5 days? Emergency guardianship moves fast. If she doesn't contest it, you could have temporary custody within 2 weeks. If she does contest it, the hearing will be scheduled quickly. I took a deep breath. What are the chances she'll contest it? Lisa was quiet for a moment. Amy, your mother is collecting over $1,500 a month in benefits for Danny. Even if she doesn't want the responsibility of caring for him, she's not going to give up that income easily. That afternoon, I drove to the courthouse and filed the petition. The clerk stamped it with an official seal and handed me a case number. Case 2024 EG 4471. Danny Morrison Emergency Guardianship Petition. It felt surreal. I was officially challenging my mother's right to make decisions for my brother. The process server would deliver the papers to Mom within 48 hours. After that, there would be no going back. Danny was in his room when I got home, humming the State Farm jingle while arranging his art supplies in precise rows. It was a routine that helped him feel in control when everything else was uncertain. I sat on his bed and watched him work. His movements were careful and deliberate, each crayon placed exactly where it belonged. Danny, I said quietly, things are going to change soon. Some of it might be scary, but it's all going to help make sure you're safe and have everything you need. He lined up his last crayon and turned to look at me. Will I stay here with you? If that's what you want, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that happens. He nodded solemnly, then did something that melted my heart. He started humming Happy Birthday not because it was anyone's birthday, but because it was the first complex song he'd attempted since Dad died. Danny was healing. Whatever happened next, I was fighting for someone who deserved to be protected and loved. Mom was about to find out that abandoning Danny was the biggest mistake she'd ever made. The papers were served on a Tuesday. I know because Mom called me exactly 37 minutes later, and I've never heard her voice that angry. "How dare you?" she hissed into the phone. "How dare you try to take him away from me?" I was at work, so I stepped into an empty conference room and closed the door. "I'm not taking him away from you, Mom. You gave him to me, remember? He's your burden now?" "That was temporary. I never said it was permanent." "Really? Because you haven't returned a single phone call or text in 3 weeks. You've made it impossible for me to access his medical care or benefits. That doesn't sound temporary to me." There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. Less angry, more calculating. "Amy, you don't understand what you're doing. Caring for Danny is more complicated than you realize. He needs specialized care that you can't provide. Then why haven't you provided it? When's the last time he saw a doctor? Chen? When's the last time he had speech therapy?" Another pause. "We can work this out. You don't need to involve the courts. We could have worked it out 3 weeks ago if you'd answered your phone. I was dealing with your father's estate. There were complications." I almost laughed. "Complications that prevented you from taking Danny to his appointments? Complications that made it impossible to transfer his insurance information so I could get his medications? Amy, if you drop this petition, we can arrange something that works for both of us." There it was. The negotiation phase. I'd been expecting this. "What did you have in mind?" "You keep caring for him, but I maintain guardianship. That way all his services stay active and you get help with the financial burden." "Help how?" "I could contribute to his expenses." I sat down heavily in one of the conference room chairs. She wanted to keep collecting his benefits while I did all the work, and throw me occasional scraps to keep me quiet. "How much were you thinking? Maybe $200 a month? That would help with groceries and things." 200 out of 1,500. And I'd bet anything that contribution would mysteriously stop after a few months. "I'll think about it," I said, knowing I wouldn't. "Amy, I'm his mother. I love him. I needed some freedom after your father died. I felt trapped taking care of Danny every day, driving him to school, managing his appointments. I needed space to figure out my own life." There it was. The real truth. Not grief, not being overwhelmed. She'd wanted freedom from the responsibility of caring for her disabled son. "Mom, when I found Danny, he was underweight and had bruises on his arms. That's not needing space. That's neglect." The line went quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Those bruises were from him hitting himself during meltdowns. You know how he gets when he's upset. "They were finger marks, Mom. Grip marks. You're imagining things." And there it was. Denial, deflection, gaslighting. The same pattern I'd seen my whole life whenever Mom was confronted with something she didn't want to face. "I have to get back to work," I said. "You have 5 days to file a response if you want to contest the petition. Amy, please don't do this to our family." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. That evening, I told Danny about the conversation. "Mom called today. She's not happy about the court papers. Danny looked up from his dinner. Is she going to come get me? The fear in his voice made my decision crystal clear. No, Danny. She's not going to take you anywhere you don't want to go. I promise. He nodded and went back to eating, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. As if to reassure himself, he started humming the Oscar Mayer jingle very quietly. 3 days later, the court clerk called. Ms. Morrison, this is Mrs. Garcia from Family Court. Your mother has filed a response contesting the emergency guardianship petition. My heart sank. What does that mean? It means we'll need to schedule a hearing. Both parties will present their cases and the judge will make a decision. Can you be available next Friday at 2 p.m.? Yes. You'll want to bring all your supporting documentation and any witnesses who can testify about your brother's care and well-being. After I hung up, I called Lisa. She's contesting it, I told her. I figured she would. Are you ready for this? I don't know. What happens at the hearing? You'll present your evidence. She'll present hers. The judge will probably want to interview Danny if he's capable of expressing his preferences. What would she argue? How can she possibly justify what she's done? She'll probably claim that placing Danny with you was always intended as a temporary arrangement while she dealt with your father's death. She'll say she was planning to resume care and that